Overcast. My name is Matt, and with me as always is Joe.
Hey.
Also joining us again is Khellendros. What's up, dude?
Yeah.
Hey, how's it going?
I was about to say you should add his name to the beginning of the announcement too.
To the what?
To the beginning, when you say with me as always, you should just say Gail too.
But he's not with me always.
Like 80% of the time.
Not on the show, though. He's too busy playing Guild Wars most of the time.
Oh,
Man.
Yeah, I did. I dropped it. I saw the shot and I took it. So I didn't do a poll this week, again, because honestly, I can't think of anything. I can't really think of anything that I really want to know, like what to ask you guys. But Joe came up with a poll. We'll get to that later. He's got a good idea. Actually, you know what? Let's just throw it out there now, Joe. Go ahead and tell them what you want to do for the poll this week.
What I want to do is simply ask, how many weeks, starting from next week show, can we go without talking about Conquest? And the 4 choices will be 0. All 4 of them.
Which would be very true because I actually do want to talk about Conquest. I want to get this out of the way real quick because I'm so tired of talking about it. But I've done Conquest a little bit since the recent changes, and I want to know what you guys think, especially Kel. How you feel about the new change and stuff now that we've had a little bit of time to play with them active.
well, I kind of think that at least the way it is right now, it's a little bit boring. I think they kind of went a little bit too far in the direction of trying to drive things toward the objectives rather than make it more about, actual PvP. There's still PvP that happens, and if you get in a good match, it can be really fun. But you can also get into a match where it's basically ring around the extractors, where you just basically run around chasing the other guy, capping extractors, and nobody ever really fights each other. And the end phase is a complete disaster right now because you barely have enough time if nobody attacks each other to get everything done to kill the boss in time, because you have to kill all the foci to get him to spawn now.
Yeah, that's the real trick, right? Is you can't actually spend time to fight anybody. It's not even like you're just being nice about it and being like, I'm not going to bother you. I'm going to let you go tag stuff. You just don't have time to do it.
Well, that's what we talked about last week with Tabula Rasa. You need like 100 participation on the PvE side to get anything done. And we'll talk about this later, but I just think it's funny that they're hosting an event this weekend because it's like a free weekend, for Conquest, and they're going to do it in, when it's in this state. I don't think that's really going to lure many people, new players in with the current state it's in.
Yeah, they need to get some PvP objectives, and I like it better than the way it was previously, I think, but there's not enough motivation to actually PvP. Unless you actually run into like one of the giant Zerg on Zerg fights, you don't really run into anything. I run by people all the time. They completely ignore me because they're much more, they're much more concerned with just getting to the next extractor and being there for the caps and everything. And everybody's just kind of racing to cap extractors and just going around each other, which is pretty disappointing because, it is a PvP mode. And, Joe brings up the free weekend, the free week coming up. Is it a whole week? What is it?
It starts today and it runs to the 29th, so it's really like, like a 4-day weekend or 5-day weekend.
Okay. So, I agree with that. I think that, it's kind of risky, right? Telling all these new players, come back, check out Conquest. Oh, by the way, we're still working on it. It's a work in progress right now.
Actually, I'm kind of wondering about that because if you notice the patch that they did today, their weekly patch, it seems like they're kind of going on like a weekly system for patches now, where they do it every Wednesday morning. And but I noticed there was no changes to Conquest this week, so I'm wondering, is this what they're happy with? I mean, are they done now? Kind of worries me a little bit because I think there's still a lot of work to be done. Maybe it's just because they didn't want to change anything with the weekend coming up. They didn't want to cause any problems, that would cause like crashes or whatever. It could be that. But I was a little bit worried when I saw that.
So the Guild Wars 2 beta weekend just ended. Do you think that, Joe, I think you put here in the notes that you think this might possibly be a timed response to the Guild Wars 2 beta weekend that they're kind of trying to pull in maybe, unsatisfied players and be like, hey, you didn't like Guild Wars, come check out Rift this week.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people that are playing Guild Wars previously played Rift. Doesn't matter how long they played Rift. If they played it all, previous subscribers have a free weekend. It's more than a weekend, like we said. It's today until the end of Sunday. So I think they think if you are unsatisfied with that, if there's any chance at all of luring them in, you might as well try.
I think it's definitely a response to that. I mean, I don't know how much they're really concerned about Guild Wars 2 because I think we talked about this, Matt, you and I, that I think it's a different player base to some extent. You're going to have some overlap, but I think Guild Wars 2 is a pretty different game. So I think you've got different people looking for different things. But I'm sure they're probably still trying to respond to that. In the same time, Missa Pandaria announced their release date today too. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, obviously, they're trying to, I think, drum up a little bit of interest for, Rift with Storm Legion coming out soon, whenever it's going to come out.
Well, I told Matt, I think the one thing that the Guild Wars, just by having, for the most part, I agree with you that it's going to have different player rates. I think the only thing it can really affect is it can make Rift more of have more raid loggers, people that literally sign in, raid, sign off, and go play Guild Wars the rest of the day. I think that's the only, I don't think you're going to see any significant subscription loss. I think that's going to be the biggest profound effect, if it does indeed have an effect.
Well, when you invite a whole bunch of new players to come and check out the new Conquest feature, I mean, the big thing with Guild Wars 2, from what I know about it, I think it's always the PvP. I know that they've worked on other areas of the game and whatnot, and that the PvE is better than the first one and blah, blah, blah. We all know what my opinion is about Guild Wars 2, but I mean, from a marketing standpoint, Guild Wars 2 is kind of like the go-to game if you're looking for PvP right now. And that's what a lot of people are looking forward to it for. So then when you come back and you play, 4 free days of Rift and you see Conquest in the state that it's in, and then you just got done playing a weekend of World versus World on Guild Wars 2, I mean, how do you guys think this is really going to hold up? How do you think? Because I think that's the battle going on right now. That's going to be the decision maker, I think, for a lot of players, is going to be where can I get the better PvP?
Well, I don't think that's. I think they're almost, looking for people that are not completely satisfied with purely PvP, and those are the people they're going to get. If you're banking on luring someone strictly on Conquest, you're not doing it. Period.
Yeah, I think Joe is, completely right. And I mean, honestly, like I said, I think that even within PvP, I think the player base between Guild Wars 2 and say Rift and WoW and SWTOR is going to be very different because the PvP in the two games plays very differently. Even the structured PvP, because the game plays much slower. It's much more skill based. I think a lot of people who like World of Warcraft and Rift and that kind of PvP are probably not going to like Guild Wars 2 PvP. So I don't know. I think people will maybe go try out Guild Wars 2, but I don't know that they're necessarily going to like it and stick with it. So I think long term, I don't know that it's going to really impact Rift all that much.
Yeah, I think the people that play Guild Wars, people that like how, all the rewards, at least for the most part, are cosmetic. People who play Rift, Tor, and WoW really want that carrot on a stick or geared treadmill, as they always call it. And without that, they almost feel misguided and they have nothing to work towards.
I definitely agree on that. I think the gear treadmill is extremely important to an MMO. I think that's what an MMORPG really is. You know what I mean? At its core, it's you have to enjoy the combat, and there's got to be something to look forward to. There's got to be something to work towards, other than just, oh, I want that pretty dress over there. It's got such a nice pink on it, and I just got to do a little bit of World versus World, and I get this pink dress.
Well, you and Kel, actually, I'll talk about this. I think there should be a treadmill in PvE. I don't think there should be any gear in PvP, period. Actually, that's probably the one thing I do think Guild Wars is going right. I don't think PvP should have PvP gear. I think you should just have cosmetic gear, and that way it's more skill-based.
I agree.
I don't know. I disagree on that. I think that you need a gear treadmill in both. I think that, especially in a game like Rift, where it's a theme park and the PvP and the PvE are separate from each other, somebody who's going to play Rift and is going to primarily do PvP and they're not going to raid and stuff, where's their treadmill? Where's their carrot on a stick? Where's their goals? And excuse me, and their senses of accomplishment and competition. You've got to have something to work towards. I think it would be better if in PvP you had like one set of gear that you work towards and not multiple tiers.
Then you're talking about making it a really long grind, though, and because if it's a set of gear, it's either going to be you're done with it really quickly, or they make it a real long grind and it takes forever. One thing that I think a couple people talked about on the forums doing was making it so that like your Warfront matches, that PvP gear is like static and it's the same for everybody, but like making more of an open world PvP style, with PvP rifts and maybe some other stuff that they add later on down the line. You could still have PvP gear, but it's only like usable in open world PvP. Because that way it's not going to really affect the competitive aspect of PvP, where the people who really are serious about PvP want to be on an even playing field with everyone and want to know whether they are actually the best or whether it's just their gear. That's the big problem now. You never know if you're really the best if you're dominating a Warfront, because maybe your gear is just that much better than everybody else.
Well, I just want to say,
say,
when you look
right.
at the tiers of gear, okay, and you look at the stat difference between the tiers of gear, it's not actually that large. I don't think it's the gear that's causing the issues. I think it's just the soul specs. It's just there's certain key talents that one person might have and another guy might not, and you don't realize it, and that's why that guy just throttled you. I think it has a lot more to do with the specs and specking and working towards your gear and specking your build. That all has to do with skill too. It's not just the execution of the build.
Well, yeah, I mean, no one's going to disagree with that, but I just feel like you're more on more even playing field when you're on PvP gear. And as far as like having something, go towards, if you're a purely PvP player, that's why there's arena and like rated, Warfronts, battlegrounds, whatever. I just like at that is far more, your rating in that is, gives you a lot more sense of accomplishment than a piece of gear will. And look at all the work they had to do with like equalizing the valor and all those like hurdles that it jump. It just, why go through all that when you could just like get rid of it, and then everyone's on an even playing field and you don't have to jump through all these hurdles in order to make things even.
Well, you never hear about gear balancing issues in like World of Warcraft anymore, right? Because World of Warcraft pretty much did, okay, here's the old tier of gear from like the last season. You can get this very easily with favor. And then here's the new tier that you have to do like rated battlegrounds and arena to get. We don't have rated battlegrounds and arena, but something like that I think could still work for Rift, where you have like a starter tier of gear that's really, really easy to get, and then you have a higher tier that's slightly better but takes a lot longer to get. So
Oh,
two
people still
tiers.
complain about it in World of Warcraft. I still hear a lot of people complain about it. It's not as bad. You're right, because with the starter gear sets, particularly when you have arena and rated battlegrounds, that makes a difference. And I do think rated battlegrounds would be great in this game, but right now I don't think we have enough PvP players to do rated battlegrounds. After the expansion, I think they should definitely make a push for it, because it would probably work.
Yeah, that's actually one of the reasons what Kel just said, how he doesn't think there's a lot of PvP players. I think that's actually one of the reasons, getting rid of PvP gear or making it purely cosmetic is actually even better, because then you are giving incentive to people who are raiding to PvP, because they can just hop in there with raid gear and have, being on a, even playing field. They don't feel like they're at any sort of disadvantage. And that's, I think in theme parks, that's generally what you get. You get people who do both. Only in, games like Guild Wars that are a little more sandbox, you have, purely PvP players, at least generally speaking.
You wouldn't be on an even playing field though, because what happens if you're farming Mailforge and you're going up against people who are still working on Hammer and all stuff? It's still not an even playing field. In fact, it's an even wider, an even bigger difference between gear. If you're talking about people just queuing up with PvE gear and what they get from raids and stuff, a lot of the community doesn't even raid. So what? They're going to go in there with tier 1 raid gear and be going up against people at full Infernal Dawn?
So many sandbox games have done it in the past. And it always works out better. So I really just do not see the problem.
I think having PvP gear gives the developers a sense of control and a way to kind of control the scale of PvP, because people are going to use the PvP gear and they don't have to go and look at balancing the stats and everything on all these others. I mean, like you look at Vengeance and Valor, and hopefully they'll do it at some point. I know they said they wouldn't, but if they change hit so that there's like a PvP only hit, they've already started on this where there are PvP only stats, like PvP only equivalents to the stats that you see on most gear, and you can't do that if you don't actually have PvP gear, you know what I mean? Otherwise, you're forced to go and have to balance all the other gear sets in the game, then you're affecting everything as a whole.
Well, like I said last week, I look at having the stats and the gear as all or nothing. You either put, like you said, accuracy on top of a Valor or / resilience stat, or you do 0. You don't do what currently is in Rift, which is, half and half type approach.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of half and half right now. I think if they're, if you're going to do it, I think you need to do, for example, you got to do hit, crit, endurance, and then valor. Because the problem is right now, certain stats, you get this problem with PvP gear, being used in PvE and vice versa, and it just creates a whole big problem. So I think if you're going to do it, you have to do all the way with it. You can't go halfway like they have now.
I agree. I think that would be awesome. So you're talking about having PvP only crit, PvP only vengeance, like attack power, spell power, PvP only hit, PvP only, I don't know, endurance, or PvP only the resist, PvP only dodge, basically everything.
Well, I don't know to that extent. I think if once you put the accuracy stat rather you suggested, I don't know. I feel like that alone would make things more fair. I don't even know how much you'd have to go beyond that, if at all, to be honest.
It'd definitely be a step in the right direction if they did PvP only hit. But I actually I hadn't even thought about things like crit, and that would be awesome because crit is like it has such a different emphasis on how important it is when you're talking about PvP versus PvE. And PvE, when you get an upgrade that's like 5 attack power or 10 attack power, that's a great upgrade because you're talking about 10 attack power applied to every single attack that you make over the course of the next 7 to 10 minutes for a boss fight. But then in PvP, that 10 attack power, you're going to let loose maybe 5 or 6 abilities before you get a kill, you know what I mean? Fights last a lot shorter in PvP, so it's not as good. You want the crit so that you can burst as hard as you can in as short a time as possible. And I think that's one of the biggest problems right now with how bursty Rift PvP is crit is factored kind of weird. I've been told that if you critically hit, the critical hit damage isn't actually reduced by Valor. It only reduces the base damage, so critical hits are hitting way harder than they should, which also puts a lot more emphasis on it. And if they made a PvP only crit stat, then they could bring that back. They could tone that back a bit so that the crits aren't so ridiculous.
Exactly. They'd be able to balance things based on the way they should be in PvP, because like endurance is a perfect example, because I think we've all said at various times that the hit point pools need to be larger in PvP. So if you have a PvP only endurance, you can have it modify hit point by a larger amount. So you'd be able to increase hit point pools that way. And then of course you could scale crit back some. And I don't know if there's any way to do it, but I think we've also said before that AoE damage in Warfronts is pretty crazy. Not really sure how you'd manage to fix that problem, but I mean, especially in Conquest, it becomes really noticeable.
I think that's actually pretty easy fix to fix the whole AoE metagame that's going on right now. Is you just reduce AoE damage in Warfronts. I mean they've done it for healing, so why not do it for AoE damage?
That's true. The only downside to that, and I've gone back and forth about this because, I play an AoE class primarily, Saboteur, right? So, I mean, that's going to hit the AoE only classes the hardest. So what do you do to compensate for that? Because a lot of the AoE classes have not so great single target. Sab's actually not too bad single target, but some of the other specs are not as great single target, and they're more for AoE. So how do you fix that problem? That's the only thing that I run into. And I thought it was unfair in a way when they did it to healers too, because if you're a healer, that kind of like cripples the main thing that you do in Warfront. So I don't know.
No, you're right. That would be a very difficult thing to do because it is true that one single AoE class, one single player doing AoE is not the problem. The problem is when you run into 5 or 6 or 10 or 20, like in Conquest, people all doing AoE, like Fan Out, for example. It's not that strong. It's really not that good of an AoE at all. But when you've got 20 or 30 marksmen all doing Fan Out all at once, that is it all adds together to be some insane damage. So there would need
Yeah.
to be some kind of like, I don't know, there would need to be some kind of diminishing return script or algorithm or something like that where, if you're getting hit by, a certain amount of AoE damage, then it starts to scale it back or something.
Or one thing that people have brought up before, and I don't even know if it's possible with Rift's engine, is whether or not you could just change the ability damage for a specific warfront. Like, for example, if you're in Conquest, Fan Out does less damage, because we all know that part of the reason why Fan Out is so good in Conquest is because Marksman has such incredible range. 35-meter range, they have the advantage over everybody else, so they can just sit back there and spam Fan Out and do a ton of damage, especially if you have like 20 or 30 marksmen, and there's a lot of rogues in Conquest typically. So maybe if you just brought down one single ability's damage in a specific warfront, but I don't know if Rift is able to do that.
I think they could do that for one single ability. The problem is, like you were, stressing before, like in Conquest, for example, that would help when you run into, 20 on 20 or 40 on 40 or whatever. But what about when you're in your group of 5 people and you run into 5 or 6 other people? You know what I mean? When you run into the smaller group battles, then you're going to be really gimped because you might be the only AoE person.
Yeah, I think particularly with it's not as much of a problem, I think, with marksman, because you can reduce fan out damage and it doesn't hurt the marksman class very much, because marksman is not really an AoE class. It's not supposed to be an AoE class. I mean, they have pretty decent AoE, but they're more of a single target spec, and mobility and kiting and stuff, and Saboteur, yeah, Saboteur is dangerous, but their range is not so great compared to like a marksman, and they're super squishy. So it's much of a problem in Conquest. I mean, do you really think so? I don't really see a huge issue with saboteurs in Conquest from what I've seen. It's really more the marksmen that seem to be the problem.
Well, my question is, does it really need to be fixed? Because yes, it can be annoying with how much AoE is going out in Conquest, but I mean the healers are also doing AoE heals, and healing is still very strong in Rift PvP. Do we really need to? Maybe we just need to kind of suck it up and realize that Conquest is the AoE metagame. Like that's just how that mode is played. It is an AoE match. It isn't, just one of those modes where the AoE is strong, and maybe that's just okay.
I think it's fine personally. I mean, I've never really had an issue with the fact that Conquest is kind of the Zerg type of thing. I mean, I think that actually was sort of what Triumph was aiming for. You know, like we said before, it's not RVR, but it is massive PvP, and that's what you get in massive PvP is a lot of AoE damage. Heck, you get it in Guild Wars 2. It's not like Guild Wars 2 is immune to it. There's AoE all over the damn place if you're sieging a castle. So
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of AoE issues, or I haven't really had an issue with AoE damage in any of the Warfronts, really, except for maybe like Port Silent. But again, maybe that's just what we have. We just have to accept it as being AoE is strong in this type of mode of play for Port Silent or for Conquest. But then, like in the Codex or in Library of the Rune Masters of Blackgarden, the AoE isn't overly strong at all. It doesn't really bother me at all. So I want to talk about there was a latest nerf that went out this morning, right, Joe?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because you're the one who brought it to my attention, because I realized when I opened up my launcher, I downloaded an update, but there's nothing on the launcher. I wonder if that's been changed, but yeah, and then actually I looked them up. They did fix the bug, though, that both Betterwolf and the GM of Tabula Rasa were discussing last week, so, in any event, at least that was fixed.
Yep, the gold pile bug got fixed. Something I forget exactly how it worked, like what the the issue was, but it had something to do with the gold piles not disappearing when they should, and they were creating line of sight issues.
Yeah.
I could have
He had
sworn that I
actually,
put this in the notes. I can't find it now. I was looking for the actual changes from this morning.
yeah, he'd actually said, Adam Hateni, the guy, the designer, had said that he was going to be changing and fixing that bug because he, I guess, been on vacation. He said he got back and was working on it. But then he also said that that he hinted that there was a nerf incoming. So I think most people kind of knew that it was going to be coming. They just didn't know what it was going to be. So.
Okay, so here it is. I have this in front of me now.
Yeah, I just put it in the notes too.
Increase the time between minion spawns in the first phase of the Lathus encounter. Increase the casting time of Annihilating Flare. Decrease damage done by Golden Cleave. Molten Gold will no longer be cast immediately after Metallic Orb. Increase the duration of Stone Seer's Wisdom. And reinforce Lathus scripting against the whole vile gold piles bug. So that's apparent. So that's basically their way of saying that's fixed.
It just seems a lot of there's basically a lot more buffer time, like in between abilities and spawning. Certain things in certain phases basically give groups, longer time to regroup. Like that's the, general theme to all those changes.
And all of these changes have to do with Phase 1 also. And from everything that I've seen, the majority of guilds that are stuck on like this, it's not because of Phase 1 that they're stuck. And granted that gold pile bug, I could see that really screwing up your attempts and preventing you from getting into Phase 2 consistently. But it's the last phase. It's Phase 2 that is really screwing with people. That is really difficult to get by. Once she goes down turns into the molten gold and comes back up in her new form, that's what people are having the most problems with. So this doesn't seem like it's as big of a deal as I initially thought when I saw the thread Lathus nerf, and I was like, oh, Lathus nerf, maybe that's a little too soon. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I think that they probably are making it a little bit easier for lesser guilds to get into Phase 2. They aren't really making it easier for lesser guilds to actually, kill Lathers. They're still going to hit the brick wall in Phase 2, so you're probably right. And the cleave might have been, nerf might have been just to maybe reduce the punishment to melee, because we talk about it all fair all the time, that melee just could absolutely punish in this game to a relentless extent.
Yeah, even in PvP, right, Kel?
Yeah, that's true. The one thing that struck me about that nerf, though, when I was looking at it is I wondered whether or not, those changes seem to relate primarily to Phase 1, but won't some of those also carry over into Phase 2 as well? So, I mean, maybe it will make it a little bit easier, but the one thing is I think this is going to be a little bit accelerated because of Storm Legion coming so soon. So I think normally I don't think Tryon would or should be nerfing like the high-end raid content this quickly, but when you're coming up upon an expansion pretty soon, I think people are trying to get themselves set, ready, maxed out for the expansion. So I don't really necessarily think it's too much of a problem to let people at least move on to the end of Infernal Dawn.
You know what's funny is I think if they never staggered the release or the gating of the release of Infernal Dawn, I wouldn't be so, opposed to these nerfs, because that would mean that didn't this come out, or at least the initial part of Infernal Dawn come out like mid-April, so talking about 3 months, that's not that terrible, but I don't think Lathus was actually unlocked till like middle to the tail end of May, so that's actually, quite soon. It's only 2 months.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's about right.
I think when you're looking at the expansion coming up on us, it's definitely, I think it's time for them to start nerfing stuff. I think that it might even be time for them to look at some of the other boss fights. Like, I know that they just introduced the hard mode Maclamos, but I mean, how long is it going to be until they nerf that? Because you can't go and nerf something like a month or weeks before the expansion comes out, because people want to see it. People want to do it. And especially people that have been subbed and have been playing actively since before Storm Legion got announced, they're really looking forward to seeing that stuff. And new players coming back for 1.9, or if they come back in 1.10, they're going to want to see the raids. They're not going to, sub and then sit on their ass for 3 months doing nothing but maybe PvP and instant adventure or something like that, waiting for the expansion to come out. they want to see the content, and you have to make that content accessible. It's just part of the natural progression and preparation for an expansion.
Well, honestly, I think I was actually. It's really funny we bring this entire thing up because I was doing my weekly earlier. I was doing GSP, and it occurred to me. I think there's a way better route they could have done than do this, because like you said, it has to be accessible. So why don't they simply make it so that all Tier 1 content, which gets pugged to in ridiculous extents, starts dropping greater marks of ascension instead of marks of ascension. That way, people get geared much faster, therefore they enter Infernal Dawn, at a much faster rate. I think that's a way better approach than nerfing the content. And most of the people that are Infernal Dawn are 3 out of 8 or 4 out of 8. So really no one is really far off of Lathis, or they're on Lathis. So I don't know. I still don't think it's early enough to learn Lathis, because the first, 3, 4 bosses, even 5 bosses really aren't super complicated. So I don't think any of those need nerfs. And Lathis is the third to last boss, plus let's not even count the 7th boss, the eggs, because those pretty much from every guild's account is a complete pushover. So really, in my opinion, this is really the second to last boss. Do we really need to nerf it? I mean, I don't know. I still think it's a little bit too soon.
I don't know. I
Yeah,
think they're
I
going to
agree.
nerf
I
Nail
think
Vortex next.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, though, what Joe said. Because honestly, if you're rather than nerf the content, because, obviously some developers spend a lot of time making this encounter, why not just accelerate people into it faster, or allow them to gear up so they can maybe just overpower it if they're going to do that? The other thing you said about hard mode Maclamos, I don't think that they'll nerf the hard modes, at least not until like right up to the expansion, because you don't have to do the hard modes. I mean, there's really nothing. I mean, you see the encounter already. There's really nothing more that. Think of it as like, if you're having like an expert version of the raid, I don't think you really need to nerf that. I mean, allow that to be the content for people who still want to bang their heads up against something right up until the point where the expansion comes out.
Well, that, and we have absolutely no idea when the expansion's coming out. Like, if the expansion was coming out anytime in September, I would say sure, nerf stuff, because we're coming up on like 6 weeks. That would be like a 6 weeks, maybe 2 months at most until the expansion. But pretty much, what is it, tail end of October is the very minimum it's coming out. And honestly, I think that it's going to come out like sometime mid-November. So we're still like 4 months away. I just think that's such a long time. You're going to nerf the content to an extent where hardcore guilds are going to be, well, not even necessarily hardcore guilds, just, somewhat, above average guilds, I should say, like Tabula Rasa we on last week, are going to be bored out of their minds by mid-August, and then just going to sit around, which is what happened in every single World of Warcraft expansion. So, or building up to the expansion, I should say. So, I don't know. I think it's way too soon. Until we get a release date, I really just don't see, which I anticipate in the next month or so, I would guess. I don't think they should be doing any type of nerfing.
Well, I don't think that the latest nerf is really a nerf. I think the latest nerf definitely is going to smooth out the fight, and a lot of people are on having that same train of thought that responded to the thread that we're taking this news from, and we're saying that it's basically going to allow guilds who haven't been on who haven't killed Lathis yet to be able to break through phase 1 more consistently, and those who are killing Lathis are going to be able to do so more consistently. And I think that's the real key thing. I think that's a good change, especially if you're one of those guilds that you have killed Lathis. Then it's terrible when you have mechanics or just things that are over or undertuned or just not working quite right, to where there's just that little bit of like RNG that can just completely throw you off for a night. Even though you got maybe 5, 6 Lathis kills under your belt, you might not get past her one night just because of whatever, a gold pile bug happens or something like that.
Well, yeah, if it turns out to be something like that, or maybe one guild is just on a, just needed the tiniest bit of a boost, they kept getting Lathis to, sub 20%, and this puts them over the top, that's not the worst in the world. That's perfectly fine. I just don't want it to be an extent where someone who's barely getting her into phase 2 can, complete the encounter. That would be a little much.
I did like what you said about accelerating people into the content, though. I think that would be an awesome move, because Harmonel is old as dirt at this point, right?
Yeah,
so
and Green Scales Blight in ROS is like ancient. It's ridiculous.
yeah, so I want to just take it one step further, and like, what's the problem with just completely getting rid of the T1 stuff at this point, just being like, here, have some hammer nail stuff.
Well, that's what I was saying. You make all the tier 1 content drop greater marks or
Right.
ascension. That'd be like awesome.
Yep, I agree. I think that would be a great move. Let's talk about weapon wardrobe, because we talked a little bit on a long time ago, one of our previous episodes a long while back. I can't. We've done 21 episodes at this point, so I can't even remember which episode it was. But we've talked about the weapon wardrobe thing a little bit, and the community definitely really wants this. But Joe, you found the thread that surfaced this whole topic again, and Tryon actually responded in here.
No, they didn't respond here. I was just referring to one player who basically explained and elaborated on the same process that SOE went through, Sunny Online Entertainment, with EverQuest 2. And it's kind of funny because I could see Tryon taking like almost the exact same route with this, in that SOE originally said, just like Tryon had said, that it's pretty much impossible to do, which, no offense, is utter bullshit. And that they eventually, after, people begging, they made it so that, you could simply do it so like a one-handed sword in your character screen can only be, changed into another one-handed sword, and, you get the point. And which me and Matt, at least, I don't know if Kel has talked to us much about this topic, are probably fine with that. I don't necessarily want my dagger to look like a two-handed staff. Like I really, if they at least put that in, I would be satisfied. And only months later, after putting a lot of resources into it, that SOE finally make it so you could put like, any weapon can look like any other weapon. And I think he made an example, like a dagger into a staff, and, vice versa. But like I said, every time Tryon brings this up, they either say like I don't know if they necessarily say it's impossible, but they say it's like insanely difficult. And they always keep referencing either it will cause PvP imbalance, which me and Matt have discussed, think that's a load of shit. And that it would be impossible to code because of animations, because of what I just mentioned. They don't want like a dagger turned into a staff. But like I just mentioned, I don't think most people even want that. They pretty much just want like their bow to not look like a shitty piece of wood. They want it to look like an actual good bow. So I don't think anyone's going to do ridiculous, wardrobe usage like that.
Yeah, back a couple months ago, when this was, a lot of people were talking about this on the beta forums, not the test shard forums. Somebody had said, that this idea that you had talked about with, what Sony did. And I think actually that's a fine idea. I have no problem with like, the way the weapons are displayed. I just think having weapon wardrobe would be great. And yeah, what they said was that the issue was with the way animations were displayed for two-handed versus one-hand weapons. Was just causing a big problem in the game engine, but that they were working on it. So it's something that they're actually trying to do. And I don't know if a lot of people have clarified that, but it is something that they're working on doing. They want to do it. It's just taking a long time for them to do it. And I don't know, maybe they just decided they didn't want to do like a shortcut way like Sony did, and just want to, maybe they'll bring it out with the expansion.
But that whole animation hurdle, isn't that referring to the fact that they think it's hard to make it so like a one-hander looks like a two-hander and vice versa?
Yeah, that was the issue.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, why couldn't they just do what SOE did, and I'd be perfectly fine with it. So, you straight up have a one-handed sword, and you change it to another one-handed sword. I don't think, sure, we might eventually want that, where one hand looks like a two-hander, but I think everyone would be perfectly satisfied, at least for, a while, with, an early incarnation of it that's simply like a bow into another bow that just doesn't look shitty.
Yeah, exactly. Like right now, my hammer on my cleric, I love the way it looks. It looks like a hammer. It's got a massive, mace top to it, and it's got a really good size handle and stuff. I really like the way it looks. And like I was looking at some of the upgrades that I could get in like PvE, and I was looking at some of the models for them and stuff, and I inspect a couple of random raiders and whatever, and they've got some really nice weapons stat-wise that would be really great upgrades for me, but the models on them are like, here's a stick with some spikes at the end of it, and that's all it is. And I don't like that, but it's a hammer, though. All I want is to use that hammer for that stats, but use the model from the hammer that I have right now. That's all I care about. Hammer to hammer, two-handed sword to two-handed sword. I think that's all anybody really wants. So I don't know, maybe Tryon is just, maybe they really want us to be able to do, one-handed sword to a two-handed axe or something like that. I don't know. I don't really see the point in doing that. I really don't. I mean, I just want, like I said, to do the same weapon type to the same weapon type so that I can get upgrades but keep my favorite model. It's really not that difficult to do. And then the other thing too is, like you said, they responded about PvP imbalances, like such as one of the lines that I remember them delivering was, if you see somebody running around in plate with a with a two-handed sword, or even if you see them running around like the what is it, the sand covered set, right, the white robes and everything that you get from the Shimmer Sand events, but they have a two-handed sword out, it's a warrior. And if they're able to change that so that instead of having a two-handed sword they have like a staff or something, then you wouldn't know if it was a warrior or not. Well, my response to that, Tryon, is just make the UI identify the damn class. Why can't I target somebody and see a mage icon? Look, it's a mage. Why do I have to analyze the debuffs and look at the weapon to try to figure out what calling they are?
Absolutely. I don't know why they haven't done that up until this point. It boggles my mind that, like, you have to actually go and, like, and try and use, like, some sort of secret decoder system to figure out what the heck the guy that you're up against is. I mean, it's ridiculous, but I definitely agree. And I think that actually is a cop-out response. And like I said, the most recent response, they didn't mention anything about PvP. They just talked about the engine limitations. But like I said, I think it may be because they're planning to do it like the full thing where you can change any weapon with the expansion. I mean, I'm just guessing. Maybe that's why, and it could just be because they don't have enough people to work on something like that right now with the expansion coming out. I mean, that could be the other reason.
Well, I if you're right about the expansion, I'm fine waiting. But wouldn't what we just discussed remove that? I mean, I believe the PvP thing is a cop-out too. I agree with Kel on this, but wouldn't what we just said, where you can only make a one-handed sword look like a one-handed sword, that would remove the entire PvP argument, because if a warrior can't use a staff, he can't turn it into a staff. So discussion over. And the other thing someone actually brought up on this thread, and I don't think he was necessarily bringing it up as like a permanent solution, but it was definitely something temporary. But you could just implement a remodeler into the game, like Ion did, or multiple other Asian games have done. Simply, I don't like what my hammer looks like. Okay, I'm gonna remodel into this weapon. Okay, we're done.
Yeah, I don't like having to destroy previous weapons, because that also means that you're gonna have to destroy your previous weapon over and over and over and over again, and that's what that kind of remodeling system does. But if that's what they had to do to get it in the game and have it functional right now, I would deal with it. I'd probably destroy my hammer.
And like I said, the guy, I'm pretty sure he was just saying it's a temporary solution. They could simply put that in for the time being, and then eventually, remove that and put a full fleshed out wardrobe in. But either way, I just think that they should have some form of it in, because I think the more basic version we keep talking about wouldn't require much resources. Honestly, it would probably be the same thing like coding the current wardrobe is.
Speaking of the current wardrobe, I want to know why it isn't functional at the low levels. I might have mentioned this before, I might not have, but I'm working on leveling a new mage. I've got 2 friggin' mages already, but my guardian mage that's 50 is a female high elf, and I really regret making her a female high elf. I haven't put a lot of time into her, so I'm re-rolling and I'm making a dwarf mage. And so I'm leveling through again, and my gear looks like crap because the low-level armors just aren't that good, right? So I want to send my new dwarf mage, I want to send him some new gear, to actually make him look cool. I've leveled 7 characters all the way to 50 right now. Why do I have to look like this again? Why can't I just send him some of my crafted stuff and put it in his wardrobe until he can use it, so that he actually looks cool while I'm leveling up?
Yeah. You're referring to how like stuff has lower requirements, all right? Because I think that's it. I don't even think you mentioned you having 750s. Why should anyone have to deal with that? Even a brand new player. I don't know. I just think that's retarded. Who cares if there's a level? Obviously you can't. Anything that's of like extreme importance, and you got whether it's like through PvP ranks or ID gear is soulbound. So what are they worried about? If I send a level 50 green, who the hell cares? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I don't see any real problem with allowing people to use, like, for example, if you get, even if it's a BOE item, why not be able to send it to a low-level character and at least let them use it in the wardrobe? I mean, obviously they're not going to be able to wear it, but, if you can put it in the wardrobe, I don't see what the problem with that is. And I actually would think it would be nice if, like for people like Matt who has like 6,000 level 50 characters, why not just why not make it so, like stuff that is soul bound is actually account bound. So you can just transfer from character to character and then, use it as a wardrobe item if you wanted to. I mean, I think the limitation for that, the only problem with that is you have a level 50 character that you just level up and boom, he can be instantly ready for Infernal Dawn. But is that really a problem?
I actually hope that they implement a BOA set of gear like World of Warcraft did. As much as I hate taking them up in WoW, it was actually really nice to basically a perk of hitting max level was, and accumulating a certain amount. Well, in that game it's badges. In this game it's marks, but accumulating enough badges in that game, you could buy BOA gear for an ult to basically make it so you could wear one set of gear throughout your leveling. It scales with you, and it just makes leveling a whole lot easier. I really hope Rift does that at some point because I thought that was a really smart move by Blizzard.
That would be a smart move, especially considering, with Storm Legion coming out, the level cap is going up by 10 levels. It's going up to 60. And I fully expect that going from level 50 to level 60 for the required experience is probably going to be kind of similar to going like level 30 to level 50 right now is. It might even be a little bit slower than that. It might even be closer to like going from like 20 to 50. I don't think it's going to be super fast. I think it's going to be, I don't want to say a grind, but it's going to be long enough that it's going to feel like you're almost doing like half of a new character again. And for new players coming in that aren't level 50 or don't have a level 50, they're going to need something to get them through all that old content because you're not going to have people queuing up and doing Iron Tombs. You're not going to have people doing Silverwood invasions and doing Gloomwood invasions, really, So they're gonna need to get those players out of the classic content ASAP, and I think something like a BOA system or some kind of like leveling gear with increased experience on it would be a really good way to help them catch back up and get to the Storm Legion content.
Yeah, and if you remember, they implemented that in Wrath. Max Holden was 80, and then when Cataclysm came out, they made it so all the BOA gear was capped at 80. There was separate gear at 85 that was also BOA gear, but you couldn't get that until you were 85 and had enough badges. But for the time being, they made it so you couldn't expansion comes out and your current character and you throw on BOA gear and make it easier to continue to scale. So they can do the same thing. They could just make it cap at 50, and then from that point on, they have to do standard leveling.
So Trion's most recent live stream was supposed to show us some Primeval Feast stuff, and it was also supposed to talk about Storm Legion, which I don't really think
I took a nap for 29 minutes, didn't you?
I'll be honest, I had the stream open in a different tab, and I was watching our live recording of episode 20 and doing some show stuff while I was kind of waiting for them to get to the Storm Legion stuff. But then they got to it, and just like the last one, it was mostly like, so Storm Legion, we can't talk about it yet.
Yeah, they mentioned two nice little tidbits, but didn't elaborate really at all whatsoever. It was like 29 minutes of Elrar having like some sort of speed hack enabled, running through Primal Feast, boring as can be, and then here's this. Okay, bye.
Well, I don't think that the Primeval Feast tour was that bad. There were some funny portions of it. I think LRR was a great host during the Primeval Feast tour, but nobody really wants to see 1.9 right now. I think, especially with how much controversy surrounded 1.9's launch. Nobody really cares that much about 1.9 right now. It's kind of like done and over with. People just want to move on from it.
But there's Summerfest, man.
Yeah, that's true. There is Summerfest for those of you that feel like doing absolutely nothing.
Summerfest is now over, by the way, actually. I was on
my character this weekend, right?
Yeah. Well, no, it stopped today. I was on my character
damn.
crafting, and boom, that's it. It ended. I got my credit for the quest that I didn't complete, and that's over.
I literally wrote in the notes, because we were going to do this last week, but we talked about Conquest so long, that Phase 2 has commenced. Who cares?
Yeah, because that's pretty much what it was, right? Summerfest was like, hey, there's some great best-in-slot essences, and outside of that, well...
well, that, plus there's so many problems. We talked about it off air with guys from Tabula Rasa. The currency dropped at an excruciatingly slow rate. I remember the day it launched, they had, I think it was called Waves of Madness. One of you guys can correct me. That was one of the events in Morale that launched with the event, and I went and did the whole event, and I got a whopping 15 currency. I was like,
Waves of
seriously, that's what I
Madness
got?
was from the Hammer No patch.
Maybe it wasn't Waves of Madness. Whatever it was definitely for the event because everyone was in Brawl. It was ridiculous. It was the first day Summer Friends went live, and it was like, seriously, like, Defiant Guardian combined, there was probably like 9 or 10 raids worth of people. I literally had like 2 FPS. It was insane. And I did the entire one. I got 15, what are they called, merit badges or whatever. And I was like, that's... Meanwhile, the last event, what were the currency in the last one? I know it's like fire theme. What was it called? You guys remember?
I think it was Was it the Magma Opals?
No, that's a really old one. God, whatever it was. I remember doing one of the events. Yeah, that was also fire theme, but that's a really old event. But
Oh, it's
regardless,
Molten Ingots.
Yeah, there you go, Molten Gods. Yeah, I remember doing an event like same scenario, like the day that event went live, and I got like 50. I was like, and what's funny is when that happened, I was like, wow, this is actually a lot less than the beads, but the beads were dropped at, even me and Matt acknowledged the beads were dropping at a ridiculous rate. It was, we did, how many of those pinatas did we kill, man? Like 7,000?
Jeez, at least.
Literally, it was like just spamming guild chat. Pinata up, okay, go kill it. But regardless of that, I saw them continuing that trend of slowing the drop of currency, but I thought the ingots rate was probably fine. I don't know why they reduced it even more.
T3 in chat room actually mentioned something that really kind of, I want to talk about this because outside of just Summerfest, right, the world events, pretty much all of them really, to be honest, after the River of Souls and then Waves of Madness was actually pretty good. But then the River of Souls event was pretty good. Like it had a lot of epicness to it. It kind of had like a really big fail right at the end of there. It didn't really work out when you were supposed to actually be able to like fight Owlsbeth at the end and everything like that. But like they had some really great ideas for these world events, and the world events have kind of really dropped off in attraction with how epic they are. And now they've kind of become just like, oh, world event. Here's 10 different quests and some gimmicky costumes. And that's about all you get out of it. And it doesn't feel like they're putting as much effort into it. So, I mean, what could they really do to spice up the world events again? And this is where T3's comment in chat room comes up, is he mentioned world event raid or dungeons that would be a good idea that are only around for the duration of the world event. And I think that would actually be awesome if there was like a dungeon that was open only for the duration of the world event and had like maybe one boss in it.
That's probably what they should have done with Dormant Core, to be honest.
They kind of did that actually in the anniversary one. Remember they had like the raid rifts that were there for the anniversary event, and actually that was I think the last good one that Tron did, and I think they put a lot of effort into that one. But I think you're right. I think they've kind of really been half-assing it on these world events for a while now. And, it's funny because they've acknowledged it a couple of times. They're like, yeah, we didn't put as much effort. And then they come out with another one, and it's just kind of like,
and they get progressively worse.
Yeah, well, but the anniversary one I thought was really great, and I was like, oh, there's a lot of really cool stuff here. They put a lot of work into this one, and then the next one was just kind of like, and the Summerfest one was just like, I mean, the Summer Swarms zone event is cool, but other than that, pretty much I didn't even bother with it. It was so lame.
Well, I think one of the biggest problems is that in all the other events, there was always stuff to do out in the world, whether it was like new zone events or the pinatas and the beads event. And you got so much currency. And this one, almost all the currency is tied to the dailies, and like 90% of the dailies are fishing, which I would guess less than like 10% of the game actually has fishing at a respectable level. So I thought that was really stupid they did that.
I have fishing pretty much maxed out. It's at 10.
Exactly. There's my case in point. Why would you tie it to fishing of all professions?
Well, it's people were Matt asked what they could do to fix world events and make them better, and it's like you look at like Waves of Madness, which I think was their best one out of all the world events they've done. I think Waves of Madness was the best one. And you look at the different things, they had so many different things you could do. They had that like alligator boss guy that would just randomly spawn and come into the town, and he was like a sort of a mini zone event. He would pop up, and it took forever to kill him, and people would just kind of come and kill him. Plus, you'd be running around and like you'd rescue like some guy that was like getting beat on by like an abyssal soldier, and you'd get like some of the currency. And then there was the little event that spawned out in the water. There was the cinematics in front of Hammerdale, and they haven't done anything like that since then. And I thought the cinematics in front of Hammerdale were really cool. I mean, they were short, but they were cool, and they haven't really done anything like that since then.
What's funny is a lot of people bitch on the forums about like the lack of rewards, but I mean honestly, besides lacking like a cool mount, that's really the only thing this event rather lacks. I think you're dead on. Like it wasn't even necessarily the rewards; it was just like the content to do, you know, that was encompassed into the event is what made it fun. It wasn't like, oh, cool, there's a new mount. I mean, the mounts are cool, but there was just so much more flair and just like I don't know, I guess creativity that was put into the last ones. But I even put in the notes, so we just chalking this up to pretty much everything or the same issues that Plague 1.9. That this is not necessarily because of laziness, but that they're devoting all their time and effort to Storm Legion. So they're pretty much like, here's a half-assed event. We have better things to work on.
I don't think they are, to be honest. I want to say yes. I want to say they are putting all of their time and effort and all of their focus is going into Storm Legion, but I don't think it is. I don't think that's the issue. It may be in some cases, but I think overall, when we're talking about the quality of world events and the quality of dungeons and how fast they're fixing stuff and the amount of time that they're spending testing on stuff, I think Trion has actually lost focus on what Rift was on release and what everybody loved about Rift on release, which was like the rifts and the invasions and the open world events and the world events and zone events and everything. All the stuff that you get to do out in the world in a theme park setting, and then you can take a break from that. You can do that at your own pace whenever you want, and then you go and you do your typical dungeons and you do your typical raids. I think that they're focusing more on typical dungeons, raids, and instance PvP now. I think they're focusing, maybe they're getting distracted by their competition. I don't know, but for whatever reason, they've lost focus on what sets Rift apart from other theme parks.
I think distracted by the competition. Exactly what they just keep seeing that what the competition releases and they try one-upping it. That just seems like the general theme of the past like 6 months.
I think so. I think particularly when you look at what's happened with the last couple world events, and like I said, the anniversary one was different, and maybe like after that one, a lot of people did go to work on Storm Legion. I mean, that would make sense because they're probably started to really ramp up production on Storm Legion around that time. But even before then, like after Waves of Madness, the two events after that were sort of less than what the previous ones were. I mean, it's like they just lost a lot of the epicness of the original ones, and I think there was less things to do. And one of the things that I think you really hit on, Matt, is the zone events and the rifts. Like, if you look at Waves of Madness, every phase of Wave of Madness had a different zone event that was tied to it, and within that there were different rifts that were new rifts that were introduced for each of those new world events, like River of Souls, and they were different graphically too. They weren't just your same old typical thing that would appear. Like if you remember, you used to have the one with the little chest that would spawn in the middle, and they were like a sunken ship that was part of it. They don't do that anymore. It's like they plop in a rift, and it may be a different rift, but it's like the same thing. It's like they just changed the names, and there's nothing really different about it. It's like they're not really trying with the rift content, which is what brought people to the game in the first place.
I almost have this feeling that they're doing this, and then they're assuming with the expansion that even if they don't retain, even the majority of the new influx of players, they'll retain a decent amount, and that will bring like the world to feel more lively because like at release, obviously the game for a lot more lively because it was just straight up more people. And maybe that's when they'll, almost overhaul the entire, like, open world, feel to the game. But if they're banking on that, and it just feels like everything they're doing is banking on Storm Legion, they're just rolling the dice. That people just don't be like, hey, bye, I don't even feel like waiting.
Yeah, it's starting to almost feel like I can log into Rift and not even have to sit around in Sanctum. Like, there is no main city. Instead, I'll just be at, like, a choose your match menu or something, like on old BattleNet or in, like, Battlefield or something, and it's like, where's the link for the instant? Oh, there's the instant venture. Click that, and you can do it all from, like, sitting at a menu, you know what I mean? It's good that they're getting these UI elements in and these methods. Yeah, these methods in that you can just like jump into content. That's awesome, but they've completely lost track. Like Kel, you were talking about like the rift with like the ship and stuff at the end. That was one of the greatest things about seeing rifts is when they opened up and you saw all these crates appear, and then there's this giant one in the center, and you're like, okay, how do I do this rift? What's going on? Or you see the giant ship, and you're like, what's going on with this? There was another great one that I really liked in Waves of Madness, where you had the free dwarves that were in 3 different cages, or that might be the same one as the ship. I don't remember if there was a broken ship in the center of that one.
That's a different one, but yeah, that one was one too. I like that one as well, and really all the ones in Waves of Madness I thought were really cool. I think there was 3 or 4 different ones that were associated with Waves of Madness, and even all the way up until the Christmas one, the Yuletide event, they still were doing different ones. But since Christmas, they haven't done anything special with rifts. Even the ones that were for the anniversary, they weren't special. They were just a new rift that looked the same as every other rift that you've ever seen.
Yeah, I miss that feeling of going into a rift or seeing a rift spawn and asking myself, having to ask myself that question, how do I do this rift? Not just, well, to do this rift, I have to kill the mobs it tells me to kill, and that's it, and then I go to the next wave.
Well, that and like, I don't know, I feel like at launch, like even obviously they were a little overtuned, them all being majors pretty much, but it wasn't even that. Me and Matt always make jokes now. Like, they'll have an event that'll spawn, and it'll be like, kill 0 out of 10 rifts, and there's 4 on the map. And you're like, really, that's it? Or it'll be like, kill 100 invasion mobs, but there's 3 rifts on the map, and they're the only ones spewing out invasions. Like, I remember at launch, even if they were overtuned, sure, but there was like 30. The entire map was just swarmed. And you don't get that sense of like, we have to like push back the invaders. Now an event spawns and you're like, all right, I don't care.
Well, yeah, they definitely need to bring back the danger aspect, of the zone invasions and the rifts. And, when you see an invasion coming down the road at you, you don't just walk right past it because you don't really give a crap. You're going to go and you're going to try and kill it, and you're going to have to try to maybe get some friends of yours to help you kill it, because if you don't, that invasion is going to take over a quest hub, and you might not be able to do quests for the next few hours.
Yeah, I mean, I really wish they had done something like that, but, even back in the old days, they kind of were going in that direction, I think, and then there were a lot of complaints on the forums about, oh, this is too difficult, I can't get in here to do my quests, and they kind of backed off from it.
Right.
I think now with mentoring and everything like that, they could actually go that route now, and I don't think people would really care all that much anymore.
Well, I remember I should tell Matt, like at launch, the other reason that was such an inconvenience was sometimes, because of the increased amount of people, events were spawning at a much faster rate, and there was no alternative leveling path. If there was like a second zone that I can go to, just in case I don't want to do a rift or an invasion rather, then I could go there. When you only have, you're pigeonholed in doing one area at one hub, and it's converted, it's kind of irritating, especially when you don't have enough time to participate. You just turn your quest or something to that effect. I think that was like the biggest crux. But like you said, the mentoring will definitely, help supplement that. And I hope that they kind of revert back to their previous mentality. But time will tell for sure.
So they told us in the last live stream that we're going to see the mage. They're going to debut the new mage souls, or the new mage soul and the new changes for the current mage souls should be next week. I don't believe they've actually set an exact date for it, but they said it was going to be a couple of weeks, so I'm assuming it's going to be next week. And this week, tomorrow, is going to be the Reddit AMA, which is Ask Me Anything.
Yep, tomorrow is Elrar, and then Friday is Scarlet Heartsman. Honestly, I'm not really too stoked about Elrar. No offense, Elrar, but I just don't think he's privy to like that much information. I think Heartsman's going to answer a lot more, meaningful questions.
They've been really holding back though when they do these live streams, and I wonder if it was because that they wanted to save everything for the AMA. But AMA's Ask Me Anything. Shouldn't it also be like ask me anything and I'll answer you, right? They're supposed to answer everything. So
I can tell you from experience that they do not answer anything, because I remember Tor did this like twice with their community manager. Though they never had a developer on it, or at least I don't think they did. And I could say that they answered definitely a lot like new stuff that wasn't previously, released. But there were so many questions where they're just like not talking about that, and I expect a lot of that on the AMA on the next 2 days.
BC Trainers from the forums, I think, is one of the guys who was involved in this organized. I actually said to him, I was like, well, because, he mentioned that they're not going to answer a lot of questions about Storm Legion. And I was like, well, then isn't this actually an AMAA? And which is Ask Me Almost Anything, which is what? Well, no, that really is a term. Ask Me Almost Anything. So that's like actually what these are. He said, yeah, it is actually an AMAA. So they won't be answering like every question about Storm Legion. I'm sure we'll get some new stuff, but probably not as much as everyone hopes.
That's really disappointing. It almost feels like they're tagging everything with Storm Legion. You know what I mean? They know the community wants Storm Legion information. They know that we're dying for this stuff, and then every time they do like a media promo thing, whether it be the live stream or this AMA or AMAA or whatever you want to call it, everybody's thinking the first thing that comes to your mind is Storm Legion. I'm going to get Storm Legion information, and that's what's bringing people to do these. And then when they don't answer that, people start coming up with, well, I kind of feel like asking them something, so I guess I'll ask them about why do my shoulders have feathers on them.
See, I think that they'll answer vague questions. Like they might give a definitive date for the mage unveiling. They might tell you like, the general schedule that they're going to start unveiling these classes, which I actually put in the notes. So I was wondering what you guys think. I think that they might, continue this every 2-3 weeks, but I have a feeling they might hold on to a calling or two for a while until, a month or maybe two before the expansion. I don't know if they're going to unveil all the souls, but I could, try and shock me before. I wouldn't be surprised if, like, I don't know, 6 weeks from now we have all the souls, unveiled.
Oh, I don't think there's any way they'll wait that long, because one thing to remember is that they're going to have to do this because they're going to do a public beta on the PTS, on the PTS, like a separate PTS shard. So if they're going to do that, obviously all the new souls are going to be available. So I think probably 2 months prior we'll have all the souls, and we'll have a much clearer picture of what exactly Storm Legion is going to have. I mean, obviously they're going to continue adding stuff as it goes along. I just don't get why they're having all this secrecy behind it right now. Because if you look at other games leading up to launch, most other games that are doing launches like like an expansion launch, they've already told the gamers everything that they're going to be getting by this point, like in like detail. I mean,
Yeah.
World of Warcraft, Mists of Pandaria, you knew everything that you were going to be getting like 6 months ago.
Yeah, seriously. They've been leaking out things about MOP, what I call, because I love calling it that, because it's such a terrible acronym. But they've been leaking stuff about that literally since like last fall. And I think I would say you're right. Like, probably by like February of this year, you knew literally everything you could possibly imagine.
Well, when Rift first came out, there wasn't a lot of hype about it. Nobody knew who Tron was. Nobody knew what Rift was. They didn't do a lot of promotion for Rift up until like a month before it actually released. Maybe it might have been a little bit more than a month. I don't know. It might have actually been. It feels like it was a little bit less. It feels like they started their whole, promotional campaign like right before launch. You know what I mean? And before then, they didn't tell anybody really anything. Nobody cared. Nobody knew. And then Rift came out, and Rift sold something like 1.5 million copies, like in its first month, or 2 million copies in its first month. And obviously, subscription numbers have come down a lot since then. We don't know exactly what the sub numbers are, because Tryon has never released actual numbers, but we are able to track, retail purchases. And I wonder if maybe they're banking on doing something like that, where they just kind of like come out from behind and just boom, Storm Legion. But I agree with you guys, because I think it's different now. Rift has been out for a year and a half almost, and it'll be over a year and a half by the time we get Storm Legion.
Yeah, I was
And
about to say
so
expansion should be handled completely different than launches. So it's,
yeah,
came
people
entirely.
know what Rift is already. They know what to expect from Rift, and if what they expect is, if their expectations are low, then you want to start building those expectations up and getting them excited for it, and that means releasing information.
Couldn't agree more. And we always I mentioned probably off air a lot. It's like when you have a new game, you don't want to get the hype machine started too early, because it might kill the game. But expansion is completely different. We already know the game. Obviously, nothing completely ridiculous is going to... I mean, as cool as the new stuff will be, I don't think anyone's expecting it's something insanely revolutionary. So, honestly, it's almost like the opposite of what you have at a game launching, for the first time. You really should be getting as much hype as possible, Like, I really think they should have started already. Like, here's the Mage Soul, next week, the Rogue Soul, whatever. They can just keep doing that and start, like, unveiling, like, an insane pace. Especially because you got, now MoP has its release date in September. Guild Wars, when's Guild Wars again, Kel? I forgot. But it's relatively soon. So,
End of August.
Well, there you go. Yeah. So all those games are coming out relatively soon. This would be like the next 6 weeks would be like prime freaking time to get this stuff out. The only thing I was gonna say to Kel was, can't they technically? I mean, I know that they're having the beta, but can't they just put an NDA in the beta so like they could technically, have them to play, but you can't talk with them.
They could, but I don't think they'll do that. I think when they do the beta, I think it's going to be no NDA. They're actually doing a friends and family beta very soon, within the next couple of weeks, from what I've heard. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, obviously, I don't know anything from that. It's just what they've been. They actually mentioned it at some point in one of the threads. They talked about doing a friends and family beta before they get started on the open beta. So, but
Well, I think that they're going to hold off. I think that they're going to continue to hold on to the class information, because the new souls, I think, is one of the biggest things that we're just dying to see what's going to happen to our classes, especially right now where nobody's really expecting any sweeping class changes because we know the expansion's coming. So it'd be pointless to rebalance what we have now at this point. They're just going to let it be, and all the rebalancing is going to come with Storm Legion, and that has people dying to know where their class is going to stand when the expansion comes. But I think that they're going to use that for hype, and they're going to hold on to that. And we might see a new soul debuted or a new calling debuted for Storm Legion changes and the new soul maybe once a month, at least leading up to the beta.
Well, to answer what T3 said, he said he doesn't think they're really dodging questions. The more they don't know. I agree with that to an extent with stuff like PA. I really think they have no idea what they're doing with PA yet. I really don't. Or they don't know how many points you're gonna have in your tree, or what the current trees, how they're going to look like, but stuff like what the new soul is going to be, what the new raid is going to be, and stuff that's very general like that. I think they definitely know what all that is. It has to be almost completely done by this point. So
they know what the new zones are. They know what the new map is.
Exactly.
That stuff like that.
So I think there's exceptions to what T3 is saying, where like PA, like I said, or how many points are going to be in your tree. Sure, there are stuff like that, but the majority of the stuff they know right now. So I do think most of the time they're dodging questions.
Like give us a zone fly through or something, or give us a quick tour through one of the raids with none of the bosses or the monsters up, because I don't think it's it's not really fair to expect them to know how all the mechanics are going to work for all the raid bosses and the 3 new raids that they're designing, but they could show us the environment for the raid, or show us some of the new dungeons, or just tidbits. I think everybody's just kind of craving for little tidbits. That's all we really want right now.
Yeah. And I know we're going to set some of this up, but the one thing I want them to do is never to do that natural gating ever again, like they do what I do. If they do that in the first raid, and Storm Legion will be pissed.
I agree. I really hope. I mean, I don't think that they're going to want people to kind of, because they're going to do 3 new raids, and from the sounds of it, sounds like these 3 new raids are all going to be available at launch simultaneously. I don't know. I think that they might release them, couple of weeks apart, so it'll be really, really close together, because they'll all be finished, but I don't think that they're all going to open at the same time, or they're going to make it so that each raid, it's kind of like 3 tiers within 1 tier, you know what I mean, where you kind of have to do this place to get some gear, and this is the really easy one, and then you move on to this one, and then you move on to that one. I don't think it's going to be 3 simultaneous progression raids, but I really don't want them to gate it either. I want you to be able to kind of go into whichever one is supposed to be first naturally, and just go in and just do it. I don't think that hard gating was a good idea. I think a lot of people were really against it for Infernal Dawn, and I think it would turn a lot of new players off if they showed up in the expansion. It's like, hey, expansion, 3 new raids, but you can only do 1 boss right now.
Yeah. And it really depends what that's the other thing. I really wish they would announce, is it 120-man, 2 10s, which I think is the best guess, 2 slivers and 120-man. But they haven't even known that, and they have to know that by now. There's no way they're still well, I don't know. You know what I mean? They have to know by now what those 3 are. There's no way they don't.
My guess is 220s and a 10. I think they would go 220s just because 20s are considered like the top level of rating, and I think a lot of Raiders would complain if it was 210s and a 20. But I think there's no doubt there's going to be one. It's just a question of what that third one's going to be. And I think we'll have probably two that launch right at the start. But like Matt said, they may do the third one a little bit later, depending on what it is. If it's another 10, maybe it'll be available at launch. If it's another 20, I could see them waiting a week or two, or maybe even a month before they drop the second 20, just to give people some time to space it out a little bit.
Well, we got to wrap this up. Anything else you guys want to drop on the show before we call this?
2 new zone events in Ember Island. They're in the game. I saw one last night. Island Storm is an air-based zone event, and the other one is Deathly Tendrils. I haven't seen that one yet. It's death-based.
I did that already.
Oh, you've done both of them? How were they? Were they cool?
Actually, I don't know. I didn't do the first one you mentioned. I did the Tendrils one. You should have dropped today because they had a new one that was up maybe it was 2 weeks ago and it was death-based. And I could have sworn it was called something Tendrils, and the boss was such a bitch. I died like 10 times.
They may have been in there, but they were really low. See, I'm on Gnarlwood, so I mean,
Oh yeah,
zone
you're on
events
that terrible
not very
show,
often.
Yeah,
But I haven't seen people talk about them though, so I didn't.
The
I think
Tendrils
they
was
were turned
definitely
real low.
up. Yeah, I think it was about 2 weeks ago I did it, and the boss is ridiculous. He keeps pulling you in, and I forgot what it was, but he hits so hard, so he'll pull you in, and he literally one-shots you. So it was so funny. We had a full 20-man raid, and literally, like, we never had more than 4 or 5 people alive at one time. We eventually killed them, but it was literally like 5 people alive, 3 people res, 3 people dead. It just kept being like that because we just kept dying because he would hit so hard.
Cool.
I think he's a little overtuned, to say the least. The one thing I will say that I had in the show is, let's forget my previous poll question. That was obviously a joke. We should seriously ask in the poll, like, give 4 choices what people want for the new PA. Because I honestly think that's the one thing that Tryon has no idea what they're doing. I think they're going to keep going in the general direction they're going. They're not going to do anything revolutionary because they keep focusing on even playing field, especially for new players. But do anticipate some sort of changes, so we could put like 4 different choices for what people want for the
Yeah,
PA.
I'd be curious to see. We'll do a PA poll this week. I'd be curious to see what people think should be doing with the planar attunement once they get the Storm Legion. They have said officially that they're not going to reset it at least, but we don't know what kind of changes they could possibly be making to it. But we got to wrap this up, so make sure that you follow Rift Overcast. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Go to facebook.com/RiftOvercast. We are at Rift Overcast on Twitter, youtube.com/Rift Overcast. We put these live broadcasts up. We record these as well. They go up on our YouTube channel every week. riftovercast.blogspot.com. You can find all of our episodes up there. Any announcements, huge stuff regarding Rift. We don't usually post like every single news hit on riftovercast.blogspot, but whenever there's anything really, really big like the Storm Legion announcement, we'll throw it up there along with the episodes. Episodes are recorded live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and they will air every Friday on riftovercast.blogspot. We're also on iTunes, and we are on Stitcher Radio. If you go to stitcherradio.com, you can also download the app from the Google Play Store on your mobile device, which you can listen to us in your car, on your way home from work, or whatever. And we want to be doing a giveaway soon. I haven't gotten word back from Tryon yet. If anybody else knows the answer to this, if you bought a White Tiger mount, I want to give one away, but I'm not sure if buying the White Tiger mount will actually give me a key that I could provide so that I could give away to somebody. So I was trying to get an answer on that, and if it doesn't give me a key, I'm trying to get Tryon to kind of cooperate with us in such a way that we can get you a free White Tiger mount. If not, going to give away 60 days of Rift Game Time by a Rift Game Time card. In order to win this, you're going to have to be a follower on either Facebook or Twitter or both. And if you are a follower on both and you do the instructions for the contest on both, then we will give you 2 entries, one for Facebook and one for Twitter. We'll have more details on the giveaway coming up. That's all the time we have right now. That's all I got.
Your name's Matt?
My name is Joe, and my name is Matt. My name is Kel. I'm just all 3 hosts all at once.
You spell my name Joe?
Yeah. All right, thanks, guys. shutting it down. And don't forget Rift AMA tomorrow and Friday. Also Friday and Saturday night we're doing
Conquest live
PvP and
stream.
Conquest. Yep, Conquest live stream with Kel. We'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching.
Peace.